Recordings, and I love that Zoom does that now. Well, Brad, how are you? It's less humid in Atlanta today, I'm gathering.
It is. It very much is. We're like I was saying earlier, we're kind of in that sweet spot of weather right now where humidity is not 100%. It's closer to like 70, and it's
Yeah,
in the 70s, upper 80s, which is a pleasant day in in Atlanta compared to other folks.
I feel that. And I'm also from California, but I'm from the Central Valley. So just dry heat, which I'm used to. But here, I feel like whenever I take a shower, I immediately walk outside my house and it's like I'm still in the shower. It's so wet outside. It's
Yep.
so gross.
Um,
Yes, well, welcome everyone. I see some people slowly trickling in. I know it's still a little bit early, but this is our first, or actually our second ever lightning talk series, and it's focused on data-driven management, and this is sponsored by Scratchpad. Scratchpad is the easiest way to update and manage your pipeline in Salesforce like never before. You can get started for free in 30 seconds, and I am dropping the link to Scratchpad here. If you've been to a few MSP events, this lightning talk format is actually a little bit different than our standard digital events. We've pulled together the best data-driven minds in the biz to talk everything from developing a data-driven mindset to the right metrics for growth and alignment. So we'll spend about 20 minutes with each of our data-driven leaders in each episode, and we're going to do a lightning fast talk on one of these topics, hence our lightning talks. And today we're going to talk about the most important qualities for data-driven leadership. This event, if you don't already know, is sponsored and hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to help our community members answer questions they might otherwise struggle to answer on their own, help them see around corners they might not even know about. And we do that through live sessions like the one you're at here today, and through a huge online forum, and hopefully in the near future, maybe far away future, in-person events. And if you like this content, you are going to love our Revenue Excellence Summit that's happening October 12th through 14th, very soon. We're going to talk about the people, the process, and the technology that you need to get ready for 2022. And I just dropped the link so you can register there. Back to today. So the all-star of data-driven management, the co-founder and CEO of SONAR and the founder of the Wizards of Ops, Brad Smith is here today, and he's going to talk about the most important qualities of a data-driven leader. Brad, give us a little intro and then we can dive in.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to be here. So yeah, my name is Brad Smith, the co-founder and CEO over here at SONAR Software. SONAR, for those that don't know much about SONAR, we are a change intelligence platform, enabling our customers to use their go-to-market tech stack in a more collaborative, unique way, removing blind spots from potential issues that we've all run into in the past, as well as making sure you're optimizing your tech stack for full efficiency. Not as important about SONAR, but much more important about my background. And I think why we decided to do this webinar is on the data-driven side. So prior to starting SONAR, I was running RevOps for multiple venture-backed startup companies here in Atlanta, as well as doing direct Salesforce consulting for a number of years. So the mix between the tactical of using systems and using great go-to-market tech, obviously Salesforce being at the sort of epicenter for the majority of that, but also using other tools to accomplish your daily jobs. It's a big piece of my background, as well as the strategic side. It's great that we have tooling, but how do we actually use those tools and leverage those to make sure that we're actually getting the results we need from our business and making sure that we can act on those results. So super excited to be talking about that. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention also we founded Wizard of Ops, which is an online Slack community very similar to MSP. In fact, Pete Kazanji, the guy who started MSP, is a mentor, good close friend of mine who's also helped us with our community. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to Pete on that one. But yeah, excited to be here.
Well, thank you. We're excited to have you. These are the topics that we're going to run through with Brad today. We're going to talk what qualities are important for data-drivenness, and then how to assess and evaluate the data that really drives you. And we love our events to be super engaging. So please pop your questions or your commentary. You have some funny jokes for us, pop them in the channel. We'll get back to them. And then also let us know where you're calling in from. We've got 2 humid places here represented. So if you're in dry heat, we'd love to be jealous of you. And, oh, sorry about that. Here is the link if you want to invite your friends. So let's get started. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. All right. Last week, with Pete, we started to talk about the basics of data-drivenness. We talked about how to build a data-driven mindset, everything from forming habits to incorporating that into everything that you do. And I think today is sort of a natural step, natural progression to establishing data-drivenness, right? It's really about honing in on the skills and the values and the tactics and the techniques that are really important for leaders to use the data-drivenness that we're talking about. So in your work, what qualities have you seen that are essential to maintain that data-drivenness?
Yeah, so there's a lot. I don't think we have nearly enough time to go through every quality that I think is out there for it. But if I were to boil it down to two, it would be being detail-oriented as well as action-oriented. And those are actually sequential. I think you do need to learn, if you're not already a detail-oriented person with a detail-oriented mindset. Have no fear. It is a skill that you can learn, as well as being action-oriented. None of this is rocket science. It's very much stuff that we need to figure out in our professional careers of how to be more detail-oriented and action-oriented. But for me personally, especially from my RevOps days of helping companies understand the data that we're ingesting, whether it be a high velocity work environment where you just have an immense amount of data and you have to make sense of it, or a little bit more of a pointed effort when it comes to a less high velocity, more high ACV, high dollar figure opportunities, both of which you need to have detail-oriented characteristics on in order for you to make sense of your data. Again, one of the biggest blind spots that I've seen, especially for sales managers, sales leaders, directors, VPs, all the way up to CROs, it can be a blind spot, not being detail-oriented, not knowing what your data is actually telling you. I feel like we've probably all been in one of those leadership meetings. I know I have at multiple companies where as the person in charge of the data, the person who's really making sure that the data is high quality, high integrity, but also making sense of it, nothing can be more frustrating or vexing than being in one of those leadership meetings and you look all the way down the row at your VP of sales or CRO or sales manager, and they say, how confident are you in your forecast? Like, oh man, I'm super confident. We're totally going to hit our number this quarter. And me being the numbers detail-oriented geek behind the screen, like, I don't know where you're getting these numbers from, but like either you're doing magic or you're sandbagging. And neither one of those, I'm not totally convinced are the right approach here. So we've seen it, and it's tough. One of the stories that we were talking about, and I'll share it now, as far as looking for that detail-oriented mindset, is actually when we were hiring our sales leader here at Sonar. We actually put his name's Danny Garcia. He's right out the door behind me, running the team. But we actually put him through an exercise as we were going through the hire process for him, because as a RevOps focused and RevOps centric company, obviously we're solving a lot of problems for RevOps folks. We have to be, quote unquote, drinking our own champagne or eating our own dog food, however you want to say it. And we have to be aware of our data. And so in order for us to continue to hire leaders here, they have to be folks that are very in tune to the data. And so, we get about halfway through his interview process, get the first call done, and then he meets with a couple other people on the team, and I present him with a challenge. And for those, especially on this call, that I'm sure are hiring managers, whether you're hiring more leaders on your team or looking for data-driven folks, highly encourage it. And I'm even happy to share the template that we used for it. I'll walk through it here in a second, but highly encourage anyone to think about putting folks through, especially in hiring processes, some type of challenge, some type of exercise to see how they think. For us, it was very simple. We get halfway through this interview process and like, all right, Danny, here's this challenge. Our current, kind of give you a little bit of lay of the land of the challenge itself. Our current conversion rate for our trials is 50%. We have a goal over the remainder of the year to increase that to 55%. How do you do it? And it's a very short and easy question. And of course, all we do is ask a question. And one of the things that you'll really quickly learn about data-driven folks and detail-oriented folks is they ask questions. And this is probably one of the best parts about doing exercises like this in hiring places, because you'll learn more about the questions people ask than probably the answers they provide, because the curiosity that comes with the nature of someone who is data-driven like this will ask a ton of questions. So of course, the first thing he asks, okay, cool, can I get a data set? Can I actually be able to look at this data? If you're telling me that our current metric is this, so we have to get it to here, I need to be able to see that. And so, export a data dump for them, and you give it to them in a Google spreadsheet. And it's really fun watching someone on the other end of that screen on a Google Doc, watching and typing their thoughts in and moving formulas around and doing stuff. But it just goes to show you that, a lot of folks, especially, myself included, sometimes being in a sales leader mentality, it's easy to talk the talk. It is much tougher to walk the walk. And having someone go through an exercise like that, again, it's going to teach you how they think. And again, how they ask questions. You want somebody to be asking questions in these environments. That's one of the most important things. And so, going through exercises like that, especially giving someone the ability to flex their detail-oriented muscle is great. I will tell you, I'm so glad we do those exercises. We had another candidate that, as we were going through that process, we presented him with the exercise, and we give it to him. Didn't ask. He asked like 2 questions, maybe. Came into the office later on for the final interview. We're like, all right, tell us how we solve this problem. How do we move our conversion rate on our trials? He's like, oh, this is easy. We don't do trials anymore. I was like, that wasn't exactly the question. It was really, here's an assignment, how do you do it? And I'm so glad we go through those exercises now, because had we not, we would have been a little blindsided of the way that he goes about solving problems. And so it's a great way, again, to see how people think and to really understand the way that they go about looking at details and looking at data and trying to make assumptions out of it.
I love that. And you're setting that tone before they even commit, like, this is the way that we think here. That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I have just a question for you. You were saying that detail-oriented is a skill that you can learn. And I know I'm really detail-oriented, but I'm thinking about people who might be struggling with that. Like, is that something that came natural for you, or is that something that you had to learn?
Oh, it's totally something I had to learn. That's why I can say it confidently that it is something you can learn. I'll just tell you this, and I'm sure my wife would laugh at this. Growing up, even historically, and terrible test taker, not very good at I had to learn how to really go into spreadsheets and figure out how to do all these formulas, how to do that. Now, I think one of my traits is being very curious and always wanting to learn, so that helped. But no, it's tough. I think if you are graced with that skill naturally, congratulations. But it's also something you can work towards and get. There's a lot of great literature out there, a lot of great webinars you can watch, things like this, as well as other activities to work on that and sort of sharpen that sword. But yeah, it's definitely something you can learn. Doesn't have to totally be something that you've inherited.
I love that. And I think to your second point where you're saying, detail-oriented and action-oriented, maybe sometimes people who are super detail-oriented have trouble getting into that action. So how do you take them toward that next stage?
Yeah. Well, I think that's really why I picked that second quality. Like, it's great that you can be detail-oriented, but if you're not able to turn all the data and what you've learned and why you've done it into something that's actionable, it's not really gonna get you that far. I think the way that I've learned that, and I'll get back into the value here in a second, but even as someone growing up sort of through the RevOps motion, you start to get the hints of it. And what you'll want to do, and this is kind of one of those pro tips if you're trying to figure out how to become more action-oriented, you have a boss that's asking you a question. If you're in an ops role, they're asking you something like, hey, Brad, what was our conversion rate last quarter from stage 4 to closed 1? And it's an easy report that you can go and run. You can put it into a spreadsheet. You can do all slicing and dicing. But if you're being asked that question, you have to think a couple steps ahead. Why is someone asking that question? And if you're able to start asking or start answering that why before they even ask you, that's a very quick way to climb the ladder, very quick way to build more rapport and trust with your leaders in your organization. I can speak confidently to this, and if anybody on here is in a RevOps, sales ops, reporting, detail-oriented role, please speak up. But there's no greater feeling than knowing when someone in an executive role comes over to you, CEO, CFO, CRO, and says, hey, we've got a board meeting coming up in 2 weeks, really need to understand this data and why it trended this way last quarter. You get to go put your headphones in, go hammer down onto a spreadsheet or any other reporting tool that you're using and start to answer that question. But it's that action orientedness. Like, yes, you can answer it, but you also need to be able to provide the why behind that. Yes, our conversion rate increased by 12% last quarter. Here were the key indicators as to why that was the case. The more you think 2 steps ahead as to why they're asking that question and how you can make their job easier, the better. But I think that also, kind of in a parallel statement, I can speak on behalf of most RevOps folks that have gone through that process, but really it's, a manager or a leader that's asking that question, but also think about the reps who you're analyzing their data. You're analyzing data for AEs and SDRs and CSMs. It's almost just as critical, if not more important, that they need to understand how and why we got to the conclusions that we did. As an example here, obviously I can speak to at least our own environment. Every one of our reps goes through training, not only on how to sell our product and how to position ourselves in the market and bring the value to our customers for it, but also to understand how they're actually performing. So we obviously have great systems in place, all of our data being part of the Salesforce side of things, but using systems like Atrium as well to help us understand what these trends are, how one rep might be performing to another. But we coach and train our teams themselves. If they are able to get to a conclusion faster and can go take action for themselves, again, it's kind of you can say leading the horse to water, or you can also say teaching someone to fish instead of giving them fish, right? Mm-hmm. And so the more you coach and train them on it, the better obviously your company's going to be, and those individual reps are going to be. So, but you have to turn it into action. We can look at it all day, but if we don't take the assumptions out of that data and see the trends and say, here's how we're either course correcting if something has gone wrong, or here's how we're actually going to expedite this one thing, like, oh great, we're doing better in this one vertical, we should really pour some fuel on the fire in that part of the business. That's the action-oriented part that you need to take.
I love that. I think what I'm hearing from you too is that these two things feed into one another. So you've got your detail, it's turning it into action, and then you're constantly improving on that. But if we've got all of that ready to go, how are you kind of assessing and reevaluating the data that you're looking at constantly to turn that into action?
It's tough. I think now, I'll just say it bluntly, I think now more than ever, excuse me, we have more data at our disposal than ever. I mean, you can see this in all the different BI tools that we can have, all the different systems we can use. So we do have more data. I think it can almost be a double-edged sword sometimes, because you can almost, we've all heard it, you can go into a paralysis by analysis. You can slice and dice and over-index and over-analyze. So I think it is a balancing act. The one thing that we suggest to our customers often is, as you're going and making changes, especially in your systems, to go track a new metric, have you thought about the outcome, again, action-oriented, that it's going to provide you? Obviously, we all sit here and track competitors. That's a very easy one. But if we're going to start slicing and dicing to a certain degree of like, well, do we have people in Minnesota, or do we have people or do we have customers in Texas? Do we have people in California? Yes, probably. I hope that you're starting to slice and dice that data with an outcome at the end of it. Like, great, one of the next field events, like you said earlier, knock on wood, we all get to be in person again sometime soon. Hopefully you're using that data. Hopefully you're not just creating it and running reports and it just sits there on the shelf. And so those are two very easy ones. But yeah, you have to be very intentional about the data you put in. And for especially anybody on the sales side of this that is responsible for putting that data in, that can be cumbersome as well. Obviously, great friends over at Scratchpad know how to make that much easier for you. So hat tip to Puyan and everybody over there for creating an amazing product. But you have to be intentional, but you also very much have to be at a point where if you're doing it, you have to be so precise on it and you have to be able to go and measure it. If not, you're wasting time.
Interesting. It's so funny. I haven't done as many of these as the people above me who I work with, but I always hear about making your data clean, making sure it's intentional. What sort of best practices do you have at SONAR for making that happen? Like, that's a big part of DataDrivenness, right? So how do you drive that?
Yeah. So as we're rapidly growing, much like a lot of the companies that are here watching this, it's easy, like I said, to get into that mode of like, well, let's track this, let's do this, let's find this. So data quality and data cleanliness, that's where you're going to really rely heavily on someone on your systems side to make sure that, all the way down to easy little validation rules to make sure as we're moving from stage 2 to stage 3, we have to put in these 5 fields, because if we're not doing that, then we're really going to take our eye off the ball. The telltale story of You have a validation rule that says if you're closing a deal, you have to say, did we win or lose to a competitor? That's a validation rule. You have to fill that field in before you can close the stage. It happens all the time where, oh man, I need to go just turn that validation rule off real quick so I can make an adjustment to something, and you forget to turn it back on. CRO runs a report 90 days later and like, guys, we killed it this quarter. We didn't lose any deals to competitors. Well, not probably the case. You just deactivated it, you forgot to turn it on. So you have to be very rigorous and very, again, intentional about how you run your systems. But the other thing that I don't think companies do enough of, and we do this on a biweekly basis, we retro. This isn't anything new. This is something that product and engineering teams have been doing forever. But as we, even as a RevOps software supporting the RevOps and sales ops and marketing ops teams, we want to make sure that we are even drinking our own champagne and making our own changes in our systems the right way. And so what we do every 2 weeks is like, hey, 2 weeks ago, we made these changes. We started tracking these 3 data points. AEs, how's that going? And just, it's one of those things, ask a question and shut up and listen type thing. But if you're not constantly getting feedback about the changes you're making, changes are happening every single day. Whether we like it or not, people are always constantly modifying how the system operates. But if you're not taking a pause, again, every week, every 2 weeks, pick your cadence. But if you're not pausing and understanding, were those changes we made successful? Are they impactful? Are they helping? That's going to be one of the first key indicators, or I would say like the early warning sign of how you get to just data overload. And what ends up happening is people will use those pieces of data, those data fields and different reports, and try to make their own assumptions. And if you're not intentional about what you add and really thoughtful about how you retro it every 2 weeks, you can find yourself in a little bit of trouble.
Interesting. We have some questions coming in, but before we got into those, is there anything else you wanted to add that I forgot to ask you about or you wanted to cover?
No, I mean, I think the biggest thing just to always keep in mind, as silly as this is one of our core values here. Change is constant. You're going to constantly be changing the way you look at your data, the way you interpret it. You're even going to be changing who is in charge of interpreting and looking at that data. Be comfortable in that. Again, the world that we live in now, where we have so much access and exposure to data, it can be a little bit intimidating, but just be comfortable in the fact that we're going to track this. Be sure to retro. Like I said, I can't kind of pound my hands on the desk hard enough, but if you're doing the right retros and you're asking for the right feedback from your team, you're going to be in a lot better shape because they're going to know why you're doing the things you're doing.
I love that. I also think it's very relevant to general life, right? Just be comfortable with change. That's awesome. So there's some questions that came in when folks registered, and they just kind of asked them in general about over the 4 episodes. But one I really liked was, what is the most unlikely but helpful data set you've used? We asked this to Pete, and he had an interesting answer. So I'm curious if this might apply to you at all.
What is the most interesting data set?
Unlikely but helpful.
Unlikely but helpful. A lot of the data that we really drive forward on is, or that we make a lot of decisions on, especially on the customer side of things. So this is post-sales, this is more on the customer success, is all geared towards the way our customers use our application. I can confidently tell you right now, in the first 90 days of our customer journey, we can almost to a T tell you on day 90, great customer, they're going to renew and potential uplift. Or we got a long way to go. We got 270 days left to really make sure that we take care of this customer and right the ship. And so a lot of that comes down to data as small as number of logins, time in app. The one metric that we knew would be important, we didn't really know how to analyze it until we had a data set big enough to do it, was even during our trial motion, once we have 3 users in our application, it's almost a slam dunk. There's almost a 99.9% chance that they buy our product. And we knew that it was going to be more impactful the more folks that we're going to be using, but we didn't know that number yet. But yeah, our magic number is 3. So we turn that around now and take that to our sales team. Like, as you're going through these trial motions, get multi-threaded, make sure you got at least 3 users in there. Trust me, it's going to benefit you. So we didn't know the outcome of that number when we started tracking it, but I'm glad we do now.
I think it's a good example of that detail. You're paying attention to that detail and turning it into action. And then I think we'll just take this last question. Ross K. Hi, Ross asked, which is more often important? Analysis in the context of the activities of salespeople or in the context of the activities of customers?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's a little bit of 51-49 because obviously they're both important. I will say the activities of customers can tell a very clear story. This is one of the things that we talk about metrics all the time internally with our customers on other webinars. You always have to be aware of vanity metrics. And I think there are times that activities of sales reps can be a little bit of a vanity. Congratulations, you sent 120 emails today. Awesome, you picked up the phone and had 200 dials. That's crazy. How'd you connect? What was your connection rate on those? What was your reply rate on those emails? What was the sentiment of that customer on that reply? And again, I think that kind of answers a little bit of the question, Ross. Like, I think if I had my choice, I would, kind of gun to my head per se, and I had to say, like, am I going to look at customer related data or am I going to look at our teams related data? I'm going to likely rely on the customer data. Look, it's a customer journey. We talk about that all the time. It starts with the first time they hear our name, and it truthfully never ends because we want customers for life. So it goes further than just a sales team, and it goes very much into how the customer is interacting with us.
Awesome. Awesome. All right.
Great question, Ross.
Thanks, Ross. I think it's time to wrap. So thank you everyone for even attending today. We know it's difficult to take some time out of your lunch break or first thing in the morning on a weekday. We loved having you here. Thank you to Scratchpad, our wonderful sponsor. They're doing awesome things. Make sure you check them out. And then Brad, thank you so much. This was fantastic. You provided such amazing content. The be comfortable with this change thing is going to be stuck in my head forever now. If you are wondering about the recordings and the key takeaways, that will be posted on our website, and I will send everyone who registered the recording of this awesome talk as well. And you can check out the 3rd episode there. We'll be having it next Tuesday, the 21st. We're going to be talking about tech and automation. Brad, thank you again. This was fantastic. We hope you have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Take care, everyone.